Hello, and thank everybody for coming today. I've been superintendent now in the Columbiana District. This is my 9th year. I've been in education for more than 25 years. And obviously tonight's about some issues in safety, some concerns that we've been discussing well before the recent incidents, specifically in Florida. However, we needed to find a way or a method or a way to get information from the public as we decided to talk a little bit about the possibility of concealed carry and other safety issues that we are experiencing within the district that we're working to try and improve safety. As part of that, we looked over some statistics. Some of us have looked at what has happened over the past 4 decades. Probably in the 80s is the least amount of what we've seen in terms of school safety issues. It's ever been increasing. Columbine was a terrible tragedy that happened in the 90s, 1999, and ever since that point, we've continued to increase in terms of active shooter incidents. The last 8 years, we've had over almost 150 incidents in the United States, and 6 incidents in Ohio. So for us, we look at things like Chardon in 2012, also Sandy Hook Elementary, and recently with Parkland, Florida. So lots of discussion about how we can improve safety. One of the items that is really a lightning rod for discussion is concealed carry for staff. How that looks, how that rolls out is a lot of what we want to try to uncover by getting some public input. So as part of that process, we decided to have this meeting tonight, and all board members wanted to be present. In order to do that, we needed to have a meeting that was a formal meeting that permitted them all to be here. Otherwise, we could have had a different meeting at a different time with maybe 1 or 2 board members representing the Board of Education, but all board members were interested in hearing the public input on this topic. Since the Parkland shooting, the latest shooting that happened in Florida, I've been very, very fortunate that over time we've had a great relationship with the Columbiana Police Department. Chief Gladys and the Columbiana City have been tremendous and continue to treat us tremendously when it comes to safety of our staff and students. The chief, in meeting with him, as we looked at some of our options moving forward, from maybe our own school resource officer to where we might be with concealed carry, to lots of different things that were going on, and our discussion seemed to get more and more important as more and more of these incidents happen. I mean, just this school year beginning in September, we've had 14 shootings nationwide. There's cause for concern. We live in a safe community. I talked to Chief quite a bit about how we do what we do, but they've been gracious enough to increase their presence in the schools. Almost every morning, I have a police officer in our building, and I think that's important. Students feel safe, parents feel safe, and they understand that we have a good relationship with them. I think that our presence has been increased since recent days, and will likely be increased through the remainder of the school year. We have to put some things in place, whether that is a concealed carry, whether that is a school resource officer. There are lots and lots of things that we need to implement. One of the things that we've been able to begin working with is getting building level security committees together to identify the individual building issues. Lots of our buildings were built, this one's 2000. I think Southside Middle School is in the 60s and Dixon is in the 50s. We did a renovation to Dixon Elementary, but still at the same time, I don't know the imperative look that we needed to do in terms of safety. So there's some design things that we think we need to look at. As we move forward looking at safety from a building level standpoint, we're going to create a district level team. Some of those representatives on the buildings, which includes community members, parents, teachers, and some building folks, will be an important part in identifying some of our weaknesses in our buildings and some of our strengths. We'll continue to build upon the strengths that we think we have. One of the strengths is this community. I think that the community in general is a very nonviolent place. It shows true in our student body. I've been here 9 years. I think we've seen a total of 8 to 9 physical altercations between students. That's pretty good, to believe it or not. That's a really good statistic. That means that we're handling a lot of the conflict that takes place internally and with our staff and students. So safety is number one. We probably in the early building meetings are just recently our middle school, elementary, and high school have met with their committees, and they've probably identified 50+ things that we could begin working on. And some of those are very easy to change, and some of those are going to be a little bit more difficult. Some of those are procedural and may be very effortless for us to change, may cause some inconveniences for our families, folks that are dropping students off and how we get them in the buildings. And some of those we're going to have to get information out to you as to why we do what we do. I think that's important moving forward. The district level meeting, we're looking at over 50+ items that we're going to have to discuss to really see what can we implement rather quickly and what can is going to take some time to do. In those discussions, I'm going to be moving that information to the Board of Education because we're going to be looking at the need for resources to implement those. Some of those will be very cost effective and some of those will be very expensive. For instance, we think we can solve Southside's entrance from the front with simply moving one of the vestibule set of doors back to the main hallway. And that could be a very quick, easy solution that when planning through through our maintenance director for over Easter break. So there's some things that we can begin implementing rather quickly. So we're doing some things. We're working locally with our police department to make sure safety is a priority. And we still believe that we have a very safe school district and a safe community. By the same token, though, we want to make sure that we address what happens in an active shooter situation. I happen to think that if that happens, we need to react to it. We do ALICE training currently. We work with our police department on how that works. We train our staff on how to do what we need to do. And we do lockdown drills. We do work with our students. So we are implementing things that we currently do now. Concealed carry and SRO are part of, a school resource officer are part of some of the discussion that become important in countering an attack for somebody that might choose to attack our school district. I've asked Chief Gladys to come. He's graciously decided that he would be able to come and make a few statements. And then I think Mrs. Williamson will ask for those of you that have some comments, some public input, if you would be so kind as to come up to the podium, state your name, and give us some of your thoughts, some of your background, what you think and why you think that maybe the concealed carry option is good or not so good. So this will give our Board of Education some great insight to what you think from the public standpoint. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Chief Gladys, and he'll be able to offer you some words of wisdom.
Well, I'll have to, let me see if I can. I'm about out of cord, so you have to excuse me here. Just enough to hang myself, I guess. I guess one of the main things I'd begin with saying is that Mr. Mook and I started here at essentially the same time. We've been here about the same length of time, and that gave us kind of a point of commonality from the start. And over the years, we've gotten really the hard part of some of this done, and that's building the trust and the relationships. And we have that trust, we have that relationship with our police department, with the schools, with all the school board members and the staff in the schools, and even the students themselves. Having the oldest DARE program in the state, we interact with students from a very young age. We are extremely cognizant of the safety, and I can tell you that in 37 years of law enforcement, I've been many places. I've worked at the local, state, and federal levels in various law enforcement positions, and I can tell you that knowing Don Mook as I do, he has an extreme amount of concern and care for the safety of the kids that are under his school district and in his buildings. That extends to his staff. It's a top-down philosophy that is just well known to our department, and that concern is really good. He touched on some really good news, and the good news is the safety of our community. This community is a pretty safe community. We don't suffer from some of the ills that many of our very close neighbors do suffer from. It doesn't mean that we're immune from it. We're certainly not. And we can't ignore what goes on nationally or in the state of Ohio. And that brings us to preparedness, and that's what we're trying to discuss now, is what things can we do? The question is, what are you doing about this? And the answer is, all that we can. We're trying to have everything on the table and make decisions and give input to the school board and to Mr. Mook to implement programs and planning and preparedness that will help to keep our students as safe as possible, our staff as safe as possible, and our community as safe as possible. The school buildings themselves, as he mentioned, were not designed with these kinds of incidents in mind. More good news that comes out of a bad situation is since the days of Columbine and the years since then, one thing that's happened to police training is that we've tried to take lessons learned from all of those incidents and implement them into our daily way of doing business, if you will. Those things are lessons learned, really hard examinations of the mistakes made by first responders and the things that we did wrong that we can learn and do better the next time. The problem becomes is that every next time brings a new set of challenges or a new wrinkle to a problem that's existed for a number of years, but has become seemingly more common here recently. So it's a constant struggle to keep up with the training and the expense and all the things we have to equip our people to respond effectively to these incidents as they occur. And we want to do everything we can to prevent them, but we also want to be prepared should the worst ever happen. And those preventive measures and that preparedness is key to trying to keep things safe, to discourage behavior. Having said that, a determined assailant with some type of issue that causes them to want to attack a school or the people in it is very difficult to defend against. It's very difficult to prevent and guard against. There's no way to effectively predict those things. You always see examination after these incidents that, well, they should have known or he exhibited these signs or symptoms, but living in a free society, one of the trade-offs to that is that we can't just randomly go after or persecute people without a little bit more than a lot of the folks have had in the past. Now, having said that, I can tell you that working with the administration here, we do look for signs and symptoms and problems and look for points of intervention to try and intervene before things happen and prevent things from happening. I think that we have been successful to a large degree in that effort. We've identified people who have needed help, and we've pointed them toward help and given them support that may, in my mind, have prevented some things that could have been a little bit more serious. Maybe not as serious as the national level, but certainly precursors that we've looked at, identified, and seen and acted upon. And we do that in conjunction with the administration here and in full cooperation with them. I don't know what the decision is going to be on any of these issues. Those are policy issues that are best decided by the administration and the school board. I know that we can bring a lot to the table as a police department, as a city, in terms of resources. It would be our intention to offer up a number of training opportunities should we proceed down the path toward concealed carry for school staff. We would anticipate training with them in conjunction with our police training. It's more than just hiding a weapon on your person and having that there. It involves training, it involves commitment, it involves a whole number of factors, including the selection process and the actual mental suitability of folks and the ability to take an educator and place into a role that they may or may not be comfortable in. And those things are all things that we've discussed and tried to come up with frameworks for. And we would offer up that joint training all the way from the classroom side of it on our end, the theory and dynamics of violent encounters and how do you react to those, our response patterns so that it's understood here what's going to happen when the police get here and how we identify one another and how we make sure that we're on the same page in terms of response. All the way from there up to simunitions training where you use simulated rounds that are actually live fire training exercises, all the way to actual live fire training exercises that we do. We would anticipate including people in those. The purpose for that being not to make them into police, but to let them know what the police intend to do when we get here and how that works, how it looks, so there are no surprises. We use a term to identify that's called deconfliction. We want to deconflict these processes so they're not a surprise to anybody, so that we don't get ourselves into a situation where bad things can happen just through a lack of training or preparedness. We can offer that up to a large degree. I know that there are programs and other things that are available on the school side at the state level and other levels that are available that can be used to prepare for these incidents. So all those things are things we've been discussing not just in the last week or two, but for literally years. And a lot of this happens behind the scenes and very quietly, but those things are by necessity, not necessarily out for public consumption, because we don't want to give away the game plan. We don't want the bad guys or the people who would attack us to know everything that we're going to do. And I think that's a very smart thing to do. We want to be as transparent as possible while at the same time reserving our options in terms of how the responses might look and how we may respond to an actual critical incident within the schools. Transparency is important to all of us, and I think that the all-call system and things that the schools do here are a great step toward that. We try very hard on the police side to be transparent as well. All the things that happened with the building of schools a number of years ago didn't anticipate this, and schools are not designed like, say, a prison or another secure facility or a military installation is. I don't know if it's desirable to have them designed that way. I don't know if we want our kids to be imprisoned in a building. We want to do something to make them as safe as possible within the framework of funding and the amount of money that we all pay in taxes to support those efforts. We want to be reasonable. We want to be safe, too. And all that comes with a cost. It comes with a monetary cost, and it comes with a cost in training. It comes with a cost in a sense of security that we all need in our community and in our schools. And certainly those things are important to us. We want to offer all the support that we can possibly muster to our superintendent, to our school staff, our Board of Education, and to our students going forward. One of my chief duties as the Chief of Police for your community is to take the community norms and mores and translate them into enforcement activity that mirror your norms and mores in this community. I don't act independently. I act with your input, much as you're going to give here tonight to our Board of Education, our superintendent, and to me personally. Many of you stop by the office and talk to me as you do here, I'm sure. We try to take those things and incorporate them into what we do as public servants, because that's really what we are. We work for you. Even though we're appointed by others, we work for you. And it's important to know what you think, to understand that, to incorporate that into our response. It's important for you to understand the challenges that we face and what we try to do about those, what that costs, and how we implement those things. So once we find that common ground and find out where we end up after having those conversations, I think we'll be a lot further toward the goals of safety and enhancing that. In the meantime, we're not sitting still and we're not just doing nothing. We have plans in place, we have security protocols, we have things we've done over the years that prepare for the worst. And I'm very much, and I get accused of this a lot, but I'm very much a worst case scenario. I don't mean to be negative, but if I prepare for the worst and then the best happens, I'm always pleasantly surprised. I kind of like that. So that's the kind of way we do that, that type of thing. We're going to offer as much as we can to the folks in our schools in terms of resources, training, understanding of the police roles, and how we can support the schools in their safety efforts, and how we keep your children safe. We have police officers here in town who have kids in the school. We have all kinds of faculty and administration members who have kids in this school. It's not happening in a vacuum. We have a vested interest in the safety of all these students, including our own children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, all those people. All of us have those people right here in these Columbiana schools. So it's really important to all of us, just as it is to you, to make sure we do this and do it the best that we possibly can, having full knowledge of all the input that you're going to give us and full knowledge of all the risks, rewards, consequences that we face. And consequences can be good, consequences can be bad. How that outcome takes place is really predicated on how we approach it and how we prepare for it. So preparedness, as my grandfather told me, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and I think that actually holds true even today. So we're trying very hard to do those things. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I appreciate the school system inviting the police department into this world and letting us give input and asking our opinion and really taking a lot of our advice. And I appreciate the opportunity to learn from our end of how that looks from the school side. That understanding is just irreplaceable. If we have that and we maintain that, I think we're just a lot further toward making this a successful effort, and that includes all of you. So that's about all I'd have right now, and I'd try to answer any questions as they come up, and I'll feel free to jump in if you don't mind.
Well, first of all, big hand to our police department for stepping up for our kids. We're very, very fortunate when it comes to cooperation with our police department. They certainly make our staff feel pretty good about where we are, and I know they make our students feel pretty good about where we are. With that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Mrs. Williamson, and she can move forward with some public input.
Okay, that moves us to item number 5, which is open public input concerning a possible resolution on employee concealed carry in the district. And before people come up, I would like to say that your input is necessary for us as a board to collaborate on a security plan that suits our students and our staff. You live here. Your children, your grandchildren, they are in the care of this school most of their day, as mine is. Your passion is them, and ours is to also do what's best for them and for everyone here in the building. So please keep your focus on concealed carry. Feel free to ask Chief Gladys or any questions that need to be asked. If you have questions that are not addressed here tonight, I encourage you to email your administrator of the building that your child or grandchildren goes to, and they would be happy to answer those. So thank you. So please feel free to step up to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Nelson. My son is in 2nd grade at Joshua Dixon. It sounds like you've given a lot of thought already to a lot of the questions. There are a range of concerns with arming teachers, from training to liability to friendly fire situations. And I know that we all agree that the safety of our children is paramount. I am not convinced that arming teachers and staff will contribute to their safety in the event of a school shooter. But I ask the board to consider not that situation, but the many other far more common scenarios that happen in schools, and how adding a gun might change the outcome. A fight in the hallway, a breakup going bad, a curious child poking through desk drawers, a student creating a disruption, banging, yelling, cursing. That one student who knows how to push everyone's buttons. That one teacher with the hair-trigger temper. I have not seen any news reports about a teacher with a gun saving the day in an active shooter situation. It is easy, however, to find news reports of supposed accidents that have happened involving armed staff. Children finding a gun a teacher left in the bathroom. A 3rd grader firing a security guard's weapon while it was still holstered. a teacher shooting herself in the leg while at school. Any one of these could have resulted in tragedy. Are you willing to risk it? I'm not. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. Jim Garstick. I've lived here for 60-some years. I raised 3 sons who attended Columbiana schools. No matter how excellent your preparations are with the police department and whatever, schools are still a very soft target. People who want to do harm to students or people go to where they will not meet resistance. Now, you can have 3 or 4 policemen in the building, but you have several buildings, and you don't know which door they might want to go in. If you go down the hall, there are 4 doors there, and a gunman wants to come in. If he picks this door, he might find somebody in there with a firearm that would stop him before he kills anybody or more than one. So I think if this would happen to be approved to permit this, it would be on a very volunteer basis, be well trained by the police department, and I think on the signs that you put on entrance doors would be only authorized persons will be allowed to possess firearms on school property. And the names and how many would never be publicized. Only administration would know who and how many. And that would be a great deterrent, in my opinion, more than anything else, because people don't go where they're going to get shot back at. They don't attack police stations. So I think it would be a very beneficial thing to have. Maybe only one person would have, but the criminal doesn't know who or how many. He's taking a big chance. Now maybe he wants to go in and get killed by suicide, but if that's going to happen, he'll do that anywhere. But in the school system, I think there should be a deterrent, so they would think twice about coming to this school, where the school down the next county will not have any protection or any resistance to them. So I would hope that they would have this opportunity to prevent violence by having a resistance and a deterrent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Landsberg. I was recently retired Army veteran, 20 years. Security. Excuse me. Security of our children, our students, and our staff is paramount. It should be number one. One, we have to think about, have we identified the threat? Who is the threat? The threat are our children. Okay, so we have to identify means to address this. Okay, does the local Columbiana school district have security managers? What, if they are, if we do have security managers, what are their jobs and what does it entail? We're talking about physical security, building security, staff security. We're talking at things inside this building, things traveling. Think about all the sporting events that all of our children go to. Are they secure there? So we have to identify the TTPs, the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures that the bad guys, that the perpetrator is trying to inflict. So we have to identify that before they do, okay? We have to identify courses of action. What happens if it's in the cafeteria? What happens if it's in the gymnasium? What happens if it's in this room right now? So those things have to be paramount and in front of everyone's mind every day. And do I believe a position needs to be made for a security manager? I don't know. It may be just an additional duty to someone who is a faculty member. That is up for y'all to decide. Maybe toss that around. Guns are not toys. It is a huge responsibility to be empowered to carry a life-saving or a life-taking device. So they're not toys. They're not to be played with. They are not to be put in a drawer. They are for our children's safety and our staff's safety. So we have to ask ourselves, arm the teachers or do nothing? Currently, we have not done anything, and we have dodged a bullet, literally. So, do we do it? I say we arm teachers. And the reason is that every day we send our loved ones out to sometimes strangers, sometimes friends and family, but we need to support them. We need to secure them.
Thank you.
Good evening, school board members, Superintendent Mook, other school leaders, and fellow neighbors. I'm here this evening as a resident of the school district who's a father of 2 school-aged daughters. I want to clarify I'm not here representing the city in any official capacity. I would first like to state my disappointment with school leadership's decision to go along with allowing tomorrow's walkout. In my opinion, you have chosen to coddle our children by placing their desire for protest and disruption over the education that they are supposed to be obtaining and we as taxpayers are funding. I believe that the first step to correcting our problem in schools is to return order, discipline, and consequence. We need these kids learning how to cope with real-world problems, not running to quiet corners. As for allowing faculty to carry concealed weapons, while there is obviously no clear right or wrong answer, and there could be awful consequences from either decision, I believe that the Second Amendment is there to give us the ability to protect ourselves. I do not believe that anyone should be forced to carry weapons in school. With that said, if a member of the school faculty is willing to submit to rigorous training and background testing to prove their capability, the positives likely outweigh the negative. We already trust them with our children, and if we can trust their judgment to mold our children's education, and they can prove their ability to safely defend, why should we stand in their way? I am glad I am not in your shoes for this decision. You will have people upset regardless of the decision you make. I personally would lean toward allowing anything you can to further protect our kids. Sure, there is risk, but forcing them to be defenseless does nothing to provide more security. The greatest risk may be continuing to leave them defenseless by doing nothing at all. Thank you for your consideration and leadership.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erica Seeger. I have two children, middle school and an elementary child. My question is, you forgot about the bus drivers. They're the first person to see that child every morning. You're the ones that have to deal with the angry parents. Little Johnny's mom's mad because the bus is running late. There you got to deal with someone irate. Do you know, are they going to have a weapon? Are they going to harm any students that are getting off at a group stop? We're all worried about the teachers, but the bus drivers are the first ones. You wave to your child goodbye every morning. Do you know what's going to happen at the next stop? I drive a school bus. I worry about it every day. We have 50 kids behind us. Teachers have 50 kids in front of us. We have to deal with traffic. They just deal with somebody throwing paper on the floor. We have millions of things that are going on. You still have to concentrate. Have you thought about what you're going to do with transportation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hi, my name is Brian Grant. I am a track and cross-country coach here at Heartland Christian. I'm a substitute teacher here in the district, and I'm the father of 3 children here at Columbiana. As an educator and a parent, I think we can all agree that our goal is for less school shootings. I just personally do not understand. Maybe I'm missing something, but I cannot understand how more guns in any situation causes less shooting. Statistically speaking, that's simply not true. I've heard somebody say that the opportunities for good outweigh the opportunities for bad. Statistically speaking, that's not true. In the last, like you said, Mr. Mook, in the last 8 years, there have been 150 school shootings. In the last 12 weeks of school, there have been 15 school shootings. In no instance, in none of those instances, has an armed teacher put a stop to a school shooting. Yet in the last 2 months, just in the last 2 months, there have been several incidences where armed teachers have either accidentally or intentionally shot a firearm in a school building. Just in the last 2 months, since 2018, that's happened twice. I guess I just don't understand the idea of arming teachers. Police officers who I have the utmost respect for and who are trained in that situation, who are trained to deal with life and death situations, like in the instance, for example, in Parkland, there was an armed resource officer right there in the building, and he had a difficult time going into a situation with a gun and shooting a student. According to statistics taken by the New York City Police on their own officers, in an active shooter situation, less than 20% of all the bullets shot hit a target. In active shooter situations, that means 4 out of every 5 shots shot by the New York City Police, who train every day with guns, who are specifically trained in those situations, 4 out of 5 shots miss. Can we expect better statistics from teachers? As an educator, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want my students, my children's teachers, to have the responsibility. One thing you can't take back as a teacher, as a parent, as a police officer, if you unintentionally hit the wrong child, you can't take that back. I don't want that responsibility. I don't think my job as an educator is to teach. Resource officers, police officers in the buildings, great. I'm all for it. Metal detectors, all for it, great. But putting more guns into a situation can't, statistically speaking, it's impossible. It can't reduce the amount of gun violence. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Rick Ulam, and I reside in the Columbiana School District. Thanks for providing the opportunity for us to express our opinions tonight. And I'd also like to thank the school leadership and those involved for being very proactive and taking the necessary steps to protect our schools and continue to make every effort in providing a safe environment for our students' education. Regardless of what we do, people will continue to do terrible things, and it's very clear that a gun-free zone doesn't prevent those active shooters. And what we can do is take action to prevent or minimize the danger to people that could face a deadly situation from an active shooter entering one of our schools. And I strongly believe having responsible, highly trained staff and the use of a firearm will make our schools safer and serve to protect the people in our classroom if an active shooter enters one of our schools. If you just consider this, and imagine an active shooter is about to enter the schoolroom where you're trapped and helpless to defend those around you and yourself. Then reconsider if you were trained on using a firearm and could stop this from happening. Which scenario would you choose? Myself, I'd much rather be the person that voluntarily accepted the serious responsibility and training necessary to offer protection and prevent that which was about to occur if we were unable to defend our children and school personnel in this situation. Confidentially providing multiple points of trained personnel throughout our building will provide the safety and redundancy needed, rather than having one potentially armed guard that may not be close to where the shootings may occur in the first place. We've seen how that situation has turned out. I'm not sure what was going through the man's head, but the situation didn't work out. Let's give our staff an opportunity to be trained so that they're permitted to offer the protection for our students and people we trust with our children every day in the classroom, and pray that they'll never have to use it.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to talk. I am a Columbiana resident. I have 3 children at Joshua Dixon Elementary. I have a 3rd grader, a 1st grader, and a preschooler. And I am here to voice strong opposition to the idea of concealed carry. Chief Gladys mentioned there's a cost, and a number of other reasons have already been mentioned, but there's a psychological cost. When we try to internalize security, we already ask a huge amount of our educators to invest in our children socially, emotionally, intellectually, and now we're considering adding the psychological burden of security. This is something that police officers spend countless hours preparing for. So the idea, as was already mentioned on the statistics of discharging a weapon, it's highly unlikely that New York City police officers having a 20% rate. I just can't imagine that, Chief Gladys, that the police department could give enough training to these educators to get them anywhere close to your officers who are highly trained. So there's a cost to educators, there's a cost to children. I think when, children, there may be very few educators who take this option, but the children will know there are firearms in the car and the school, and that brings up the idea of who is carrying this. I don't think that's not the relationship that children have with their teachers. They don't look at them as, I'm very in favor of security in the school, but I don't think that's the relationship we want to foster between our students and their educators. And to be honest with you, it comes at a cost to a parent if this were implemented. This just is I have had I'm a new resident to Columbiana. I've had a wonderful experience in the school system. But just to be frank, this would really make me pause about whether I want my children in this school system. And that is, like I said, I've had a very positive experience. I don't know that I would pull my children out, but it certainly is enough to make my wife and I stop and think about whether we want our children enrolled in the school district. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to comment real quick, because I'm listening to everybody and I appreciate all your conversations. I just want you to understand that we're not thinking of this as a popular thing or it's a trend or anything like that. Listen, the importance of this is simple. We care about the children that are in our school. I'm on this school board and every one of us are on here because we care about every single little child all the way to high school that's in our school. The problem is there's these other crazies that are out there that don't care about anything. And their whole thoughts are to ruin us and those little lives and all those little children. Listen, we've looked at this. It's terrible that we've come to this day and age where we have to sit there and look at doing something like this. But the fact is we have to protect our students, and what it does too is it serves as a deterrent against those aggressors that come through this building. Now, I understand some of you are opposed to some of this, and I get that. There's a safety of carrying a gun. There's a responsibility of that. But also along with that comes the protection of these little children and these children as they grown up. Because the same way as you would protect them in your home, if somebody was to break into your house and attack you or your children, is the same way we're looking at it in this school district to protect those children, those innocent children that you've raised through the years, from possible harm that could come across them. Chief, let me ask you this. In the event of an active shooter situation, what is the response time for your police department to get to our school?
Our response times are generally pretty good. The gap lies in the problem that we've seen nationwide, that much of the harm or damage is inflicted in the first few minutes, and that's a critical period of time where the police may not be here yet. I would say that we get most anywhere in the city within a couple minutes, and certainly not much more than that, and our response times are excellent. But what happens between the incident starting and the time we get there, that's the critical question. That's one that I can't answer. But nationwide, and as someone said, statistically speaking, a lot of the damage happens prior to the arrival of authorities, and sometimes, in most cases, terminates upon the arrival of authorities, and when the active shooter meets armed resistance, either suicide or surrender in most cases. There have been a couple exceptions to that, but the shorter answer is we get there very quickly. The question is it going to be quickly enough? That's one of the strengths I see in considering things like arming selected staff. You'd have someone on site. It's also a strength of an SRO program, or having officers in the schools. There are many ways to approach it. And I guess that's some of the things we have to struggle with and how we achieve that, that goal.
And in some of those cases, too, with the resource officer in a school, we have 3 buildings. So the shooter comes through the front door. Where's the resource officer?
If we're lucky, he's right there. If we're not,
if we're lucky,
he's on the other side of the building. And frankly, you know, a resource officer is limited in terms of where they can be and how many we have. We have 3 major buildings. This campus itself is extremely large. And to get from one side of the building to the other, I would venture to guess that responding officers from the field might actually get there at the same time as someone from the other side of the building.
Thank you.
My name is Rich Berryman. I have a question for Mr. Mook, and whether you will answer it now or later on in the program. But it seems that, well, let's drop the guns and so forth right now, and let's go to the classroom where the teacher is. What program do you have in place to train those teachers to identify students that are on that edge? What is the procedure from the time of the teacher might identify? Who do they contact next, and where does it go from there? Could you tell us about that, what we have set up? And I think that's very important.
Right, it is very important, Mr. Berryman. So mental health is an issue across the country, and not just part of what we need to look at here. So discipline, referrals, behaviors, those are all situations that, frankly, I think we need more development in. I think our special ed department and our school psychologist, I think they're a tremendous asset to us. They've been able to identify things rather quickly because their training is far more extensive than your typical math teacher that may come right out of school. There isn't any doubt that there has to be more training in those areas of professional development in terms of identifying and seeing. I think personally we have worked on school climate, we've worked on the environment, we worked on trying to be a very caring facility. I can tell you Mrs. Sharshin sets the tone for our district in terms of how our buildings operate and how we do. I bet if you talk to Mr. Buzzard and Mr. Martin, they follow her lead because care and is the first part of the equation to let our students know we care about what's going on. And I think from a standpoint of time and effort in the mental health area, we want to get involved with our programs from the county and get them into our buildings a little bit more. That also takes parents that are sitting out here to say, the school's identified an issue, let's work with them. We do get a lot of resistance when it comes to those types of things when we say, hey, we see an issue. And parents take that very personal, unfortunately. But that's all part of the equation that we're trying to develop to work with our families to try and make sure from the ground level up that we're building the best possible student and citizen across the board. So yeah, there's no doubt you can't leave that out of the equation. That's a given for what we need to continue to work on and develop. You know, ours right now is looking at what are we going to do if someone decides to penetrate our building from the outside. It may not be one of our students. I know that the statistics say that it's a student that may be the one we're looking at. But it may also be some student from somewhere else or some parent from somewhere else. In the 80s in Salina, Ohio, our gal that came up about bus drivers, that we haven't left them out of the equation. Because that was a bus driver issue, that one incident in Ohio in the 80s. So we need to try and find the best ways to protect our kids. And it may be a school resource officer. It may be some of the work we're doing currently with the police department. And it may be considering particular staff members that may have some armed forces background potentially with us. Or maybe it's you pass this resolution to look at an individual who can work in terms of security for you. It doesn't necessarily, when you say arm the staff, it doesn't mean arm the teachers necessarily. It means that you have to pass a policy in order to implement a weapon into the scenario. I certainly don't sit up here with all the answers. And we're looking for solutions. That's part of what our safety committees are going to be dedicated to doing. And we're looking for solutions. I know there is no solution to stop gun incidents in the United States. There isn't one. Is it gun control? Is it what we do and how we do with the Second Amendment? That's for the legislature to work on. That's for this community to talk to their legislature. What we're looking at from our standpoint is how do we deal with a situation that may or may not happen. And God forbid it happens. But how do we do it? Right now, we go to a classroom, we lock down, we look to try to get away. I mean, that's what we do right now. And if someone enters the room, we throw a stapler or a desk or something at them. That's very difficult to palate at times for me, thinking about the safety of kids. Is an SRO officer the solution? I don't know if it's a solution. It might be part of ours here. We know it didn't happen in Florida. He didn't engage that shooter. I don't know that if I were the person that I would be able to do that. I don't know that, because you want to know what? I'm not trained to do that. I haven't been in those situations. I get it. When someone comes up to the mic and says, can a teacher do that? I don't know. I don't know.
My name is Gary Wilms. I'm a 1958 graduate of Columbiana High School. And back when I came to high school, we never even thought about guns unless we were going out hunting on the first day of hunting season. But I want to bring to your attention the Masonic Model Student Assistance Program that's sponsored by the Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Ohio, which teaches teachers, administrators, bus drivers, custodians, anybody involved in the school system on how to see and catch these signs of the young people before they become potential shooters. It carries a 14 credit for the teachers, and it's a 2-day program, and it's provided in full and paid for by the Masonic Grand Lodge of Ohio. It's being received very well all over the state, and I would encourage that we look at this program and do it in our schools. Secondly, I have a card that you can get in touch with the man who's in charge of it. He covers a 4-county area, Mahoning, Columbiana, Carroll, and Jefferson County, who's in charge of setting this up and coordinating it and getting the people lined up to come in and teach this. So we as adults can see an effect or a result or a situation that may lead to someone going off the deep end and pulling a gun and shooting. I feel this is one way we can look at the program and perhaps head it off before it becomes a program. Secondly, my personal opinion about guns should not be put upon school administrators or teachers. They are not trained or taught to use a gun in a classroom. They use a pencil and an eraser, a piece of chalk, not a piece of lead that's fired at tremendous volume. I feel that if we're going to have guns in the school, it should be in professionally trained police people, not the teachers, not the administration. That's no good, because there's no way you can train everyone to be a good police officer and be a teacher both. I don't see that as working out in our school or anywhere. So my feelings is, let's try and prevent them before they become shooters in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Justin Townsend. I have 2 children. I wanted to speak for the option for concealed carry. Again, with other people said, if teachers not comfortable or staff's not comfortable, they shouldn't be made to, but if they want to. Touched on a couple of things here. Response time, I have a concern with that. We've got the train tracks. I mean, you got one of those slow-moving trains. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. So you got that piece. The other point already a little bit mentioned is, to me, the beauty of concealed carry is there could be 0 teachers staffed to do it, but if all the media here says it's a possibility, that's in someone's head, and it makes it's no longer a soft target. It's a dangerous place. People don't go into McDonald's and shoot it up because they don't know who's sitting at the table. And then from the police perspective, yeah, it certainly can complicate things, but a lot of that I think can be handled with policy. If the protocol is you only pull that gun out if you're going to use it, just like if you're a CCW holder, you don't pull it out for any other reason. And when you're done with it, you put it away and you wait for the first responder to get there. So again, no one knows you have it. So from that perspective, and then the other piece, I hate to bring this up, but at the end of the day, I think it's a low-cost option, and financial things need to be considered. You can't put a price on my kids, I know that, but at the same time, there's only so many things that can be done from that perspective too, so I think it's a palatable option from that perspective. So thanks for considering.
Thank you.
My name is Nathan Whitehead, and I'm a junior at Columbiana High School. I just want to thank the board for letting us come to speak with you about the concealed carry. I just want to say that I don't feel comfortable standing up here and talking. And I don't feel comfortable when I'm in a classroom that has one door, knowing that my best recourse is to throw books at the person. When I was in elementary school, we were taught that during lockdown, we are supposed to pretend we're not there, hide under a desk, lock the door, turn the lights off. And unfortunately, we learned that that doesn't work. And now we're taught to barricade the doors, throw whatever objects we have around us at the perpetrator, and we're finding out that that doesn't really work either. 98% of mass shootings since 1960 have been in gun-free zones. And I think there's a reason for that. And police investigations have shown that mass shooters, these crazy people, they go after soft targets specifically. Concealed carry card holders, they are the most law-abiding people in America. There's no group that obeys the law more than they do. I think they're very responsible. They're convicted of misdemeanors and felonies at a sixth the rate of police officers. So I think if we can trust our police officers with guns, for them to be responsible, we should be able to trust our teachers as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we are about at our time. Did you want to go up for one? Okay, we'll do one last one, and then we will adjourn for this evening.
Thank you very much, Board, for allowing me to speak. My name is Dylan Edwards, and I'm a 2014 graduate of this fine school. And if there's one thing that I definitely learned in my 12 years in the district, it's that if the board is going to, and the administration are going to take any action on this subject, it's going to be with the proper necessary thought and deliberation that the subject deserves. That being said, I have faith that whatever the board is going to decide on this is going to have that necessary proper discussion and deliberation, will ultimately be the right decision. That said, I think when it comes down to it, there's some inherent risks in having a voluntary concealed carry program. Someone said that the life of their child is priceless, and that is absolutely correct, but there's an inherent liability in having, you know, an instance of friendly fire in a shooting, and we would assume that no one would take that unfortunate circumstance and make it worse by, you know, in a law-based society suing the district or the teacher based on an instance of friendly fire, but that is a liability that the district carries that could cost more than concealed carry and more than a resource officer. I think as a community member and a taxpayer, looking at it from both a common sense and dollars and cents perspective is a necessary and great idea, and I think in the long run it makes more sense in common sense to invest in the resource officer, because we carry less risk in that way to the district and the students than we really do in any of the other forms, and I trust whatever the board is going to do will be the right decision, but as a community member I think it would be best, and that would be my standpoint, to look at investing in a resource officer. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and good luck in making the decision. I would not want to be in your shoes.
Thank you. Once again, if you had a question or a comment or anything, please feel free to address the administrators of the buildings, and they will be happy to answer those questions. Item number 6, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Williamson?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Roncone?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Karen?
Yes.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. And thank you again.